and welcome to another episode of The Heart of CX. I'm Joanna Palmer, and with me is Max Ball. Hey, Max, how's it going?
It's going really well, Joanna. How are you?
It's going well. Nice, crisp fall day. So, we've got two huskies, and they are cold weather freaks.
Mm.
We've got a little husky puppy who wants the back door open all day long so she can
Oh.
sit halfway inside and halfway outside.
Yeah, that's kind of how they work, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's funny. That's yeah. We're California. Our seasons are relatively muted, but when I look out my window, the leaves are turning. We had a big rain, so it's nice. It's kind of
Awesome.
getting towards it. And I have a story I want to share. I now working at Forrester, I get exposed to all kinds of new things and ideas and stuff.
Mhm.
And one of them is a theory that won a Nobel Prize winning economist came up with this theory. I don't think he won it just because of this theory, but it was a significant piece of the body of his work. And
Okay.
it's something called the peak end experience.
The peak end experience. All right. So tell us more about this, Max.
Let me tell you more about the peak end experience. So the idea here is that our memories are limited, flawed, and all you have to do is watch a couple of shows on TV and you'll get that concept beat into your head over and over and over with the witness didn't remember it right. And what he ended up claiming, and has a lot of good backup for why this is true, is what we remember is the peak experience in any interaction. So it's the
Okay.
peak experience, and that can be a good peak, it can be a bad peak.
All
So,
right.
and then the end experience. So, kind of, the last part of whatever your interaction is.
So
So,
already my curiosity is piqued because it's drilled in our heads that first impressions are so critical.
oh, that's a great point. Yeah, you're right. And this is saying, meh, whatever, not so much.
Right.
Um,
So
that's
tell us
interesting.
more. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so I thought what I'd do is I'd talk about this. I talk about his experiments. I have a CX relevance story and a customer journey story, and you will chime in with all kinds of stuff here. So let me tell the first kind of what the experiment he did, and we'll kind of morph from there. So what he did was he had people come into wherever they were doing the experience, the office, and they had, and anyone who was a subject in this experiment, they had you put your hand in freezing cold water for a minute.
Okay.
Not, and so this
Not
this
pleasant.
obviously was the peak, and it was a negative peak.
Right.
And then what they did was for half the people, they put their hand in freezing water again, but it was 1 degree centigrade warmer, so 2+ degrees Fahrenheit warmer, which apparently is not as bad. And they only did it for 30 seconds. So everyone had their hand chucked in frozen water for a minute. Half the people had their hand then put back in freezing water, but only for 30 seconds. At the end, they did something to make sure it was a consistent positive experience. So the end was taken out of this equation. Guess which group rated this as a more negative experience?
So intuitively, if I didn't know the name of this in terms of the peak end experience, intuitively you would say, okay, two negatives would be worse than the first negative. But that second negative is more positive than, than that initial negative.
Yeah. and you're right, and the story does kind of tease the punchline so much that you're smart and you got it right.
Yes.
And the theory is that because the part of the peak is just how negative it was, but in this case, the two negative peaks were the same, so there's no difference there. But the thing was that the delta from the peak experience to the next experience or the baseline experience was lower. Because in the people who only got their hands frozen once, they then went and, chatted for a little bit and had this end experience, which was positive. So it was more memorable that, oh my gosh, I was freezing. Whereas the other one was like, yeah, my hand was cold, but it wasn't as bad. So it was still a negative experience. It wasn't like they said, gosh, I love getting my hand frozen. Now I'm going home and doing this.
Right.
But it was the delta between that and the other things around it was less. So it was perceived as a less negative experience, which I find fascinating.
It's very fascinating, very fascinating. And when we start thinking about this and applying this to customer experience as well, certain questions pop into my mind, such as, so if there is that negative experience, so whatever that peak negative experience is, and then the end experience being positive, can you create such an experience with that end experience outweighing that negative experience so much so that it's a more favorable outcome than if you didn't have the negative experience at all?
So, yes. And I think that the other way to think about it is I don't have to have that at the end. I mean, the end experience is positive. I can have a nice end experience. It doesn't have to be the penultimate peak. If you can make that the penultimate peak, that's great. But the other thing, just anywhere in the experience, you can either smooth out a negative peak by putting stuff around it or mitigating it somehow so it's not as strong of a negative, or create a positive peak that is stronger. And so an example in a call or a customer interaction might be, I have a chatbot that's an idiot and it frustrates me, and I I'm stuck in a loop and I'm tired of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it escalates to an agent, and the agent gets all the data, and that's flawless, and the agent answers my question very quickly. That can become the bigger positive experience and wash out the fact that, it's like, oh yeah, that's right, the bot was kind of stupid, but the agent was so smart, you just forget about that part.
Yes, yes, that's a really great point. And as we think about introducing technology into the contact center, additional technology such as a bot, I think a lot of times customers shy away from introducing that technology based on fear, right? Oh, well, customers like talking to the agents. And so, as long as you design it so that they can opt out and talk to an agent, you almost de-risk this in terms of, even if they have a poor experience, and I'm sure that everybody would do everything within their power not to have that initial poor experience, but if they were to encounter a poor experience, as long as they were able to opt out to an agent and that agent provided an excellent experience, then it should net out to a positive memory.
To a positive, yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And it gets, one of the challenges with this is this is customer experience 101. Our perception of the interaction with the company is broader than the call to the call center.
Right.
And so there's things that fall outside of that. And I have an example, slightly different. um, a And this was a speech by a doctor, and I should have gotten her name, but I'll make it, I'll not name names so that it's the story will be the story without the name of the doctor or the place where all this happened. This woman was a doctor. Her father was having health issues, and there was reason to believe he had cancer. So the doctor had connections with a very good, place to go for cancer, and she set up her father to go there. And so her parents uh, went through some tests, got the diagnosis from the doctor, and sounded like the diagnosis wasn't great, but this doctor was literally like the best doctor in the United States for this thing. So the daughter was so proud of herself the way she teed this up, and yeah, this was a bad thing, but I pulled strings. I made, this is going to be the greatest experience in the world. Apparently, this doctor wasn't just knowledgeable, but he had wonderful bedside manner and explained everything very well, so that they walked out of that meeting with the doctor just. I was going to say on cloud nine, but you're not on cloud nine in this moment. I mean, it wasn't like they were discovering he had it. They knew he had it, and they found out what it was, and they got all the details. So it was a as good an experience as that could be. Mm-hmm. Then they went to get their car, and in all the think about it. You're going in for a meeting like this. Are you really paying attention to where your valet ticket is? They lost the valet ticket.
Oh, no.
And apparently the valets were rude, and the valets were unsympathetic, and they waited 4 hours to get their car.
Oh, no.
So now this doctor, who was so proud of giving her parents such a wonderful experience, she talked about, now every time they get together with Thanksgiving, they talk about that experience, but it's not, what a great doctor. It's, oh my God, what a valet nightmare. So the peak can fall out of your control sometimes, or as this overall hospital, they have to look at every element of it. You can't just say, well, the medical care was perfect. The valet is important too, from a customer experience standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. That is super interesting, because as you think about the contact center and providing great customer service, it is so much more than that. It is so much more than just that moment in time and being able to pay attention to all of the details. If you think about that experience, there's certainly ways I would think that doctor's office could potentially avoid those issues. Potentially, looking at location of office building, could have there been open parking where it's not necessarily valet, or
and this one, I think you just fire those valets and you hire some who have some customer skills.
yes,
and,
yes,
and that's not fair. You rewrite the rules so that if somebody obviously just honestly misplaced their ticket, they have something other than waiting 4 hours to do it. And it sounded like these valets did not have good bedside manner. So, some training on that. I think there's mitigation's less than firing, but it's
yeah. And I even think about just a recent car buying experience too, for one of our daughters who wrecked her car, needed a new car. So car buying experience, purchased the car, private seller, very, very accommodating. I asked him to take it to a location so that my mechanic could look over it prior to purchasing it after test driving. And he was very accommodating on all of that. Well, a week later, the car completely breaks down. And up until that point, very positive experience, highly rated seller, really thought it was a great buying experience. And then once we found out the root cause of the car breaking down, the seller had tried fixing or changing the timing belt on his own and hadn't tightened the bolts properly, and the bolt C's broke off, caused the car to be inoperable. And it changed the entire tone of that car buying experience, having to get the car towed and a significant amount of work to be done on the car.
Right? That did.
But thinking about that seller's perspective, I didn't go back to the seller and tell them any of this, but thinking about that seller's perspective, I'm sure that he thinks he provided this great buying opportunity and great buying experience, but he doesn't know the end part. He doesn't know that end part that sticks in my mind and is oh so memorable to make it a negative buying experience.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful story. I had two thoughts on that. One is it would have been very different if he had resisted you on taking it to your mechanic.
Yes. Yes.
And you probably have a pretty good beef with your mechanic, although I would imagine something like that was just would have been really hard to spot.
Yeah.
And so I get all that. The other, yeah, you bring up a good point, and there's another story from some Forrester research around this. Is if you think about buying pet food, and let's just do the simple: you actually go to the store. What a 90s thing to do, but
Right.
actually
Not
in the
even
90s was
curbside
the other.
pickup.
Yeah, actually the 90s was the other time where people were trying pet food delivery, but I remember back then when the tech bubble burst, everyone said, oh, that was stupid. Pet food's so heavy you can never get the shipping costs in line, but somehow we fixed that in the interim 20 30 years. But when you buy pet food, let's say that your puppy, you needed to get some puppy food, or now he's old enough you want to move him to adult food, and you're going to use a kind you've never used before. So you do your research, go in the store, maybe they're really helpful, and they make a recommendation, and you're like, okay, good, I'll try this. And then you walk out of the store, and the people in the store, that's when they high five and great, Joanna, we couldn't have given her a better experience. Jim, you were so smart with what you recommended. And Mary, you did such a good job of explaining why it was good. And we nailed this. Well, you're not done with that. Your journey has just begun, because you don't care. You're not going to judge whether that is any good or not until you put it in the bowl and your dog loves it or doesn't, or gets sick after eating it or whatever. So
Right.
there's so many times the customer journey is and the exact same thing with the car buying. The end of the journey is completely out of the purview of the company. You can't see it, you can't see it. And I guess, we've talked about Chewy a couple times, and that's probably, I would bet they're aware of that. And they probably have some sort of a follow-up they do with a customer when they do buy a new dog food, just saying, hey, how was it? Or if not, they should. And it, I thought that was interesting way to think about it too, is that, both these examples, the end of the customer journey is when it doesn't break or when it tastes good.
Right, right. Exactly. Exactly. And like you said, it's out of the purview of the initial sale. That point of time where the company sees that customer experience is very different than the duration in which the customer is measuring the experience. And so anything that we can do as companies to continue to measure, to continue to build stickiness, even beyond that initial purchase, I think really helps deepen that overall experience. So going back to that pet food example, let's say, heaven forbid, it was a negative experience because the dog reacted poorly to it. If there was some sort of check-in that dog food company did,
Exactly.
knowing thinking about a personalized experience. Hey, you have a new puppy. This is the first time you've purchased dog food from us. We hope everything is okay. How's your dog enjoying it? Then you're layering in potentially a positive interaction beyond that negative experience.
Very much so. Very much so. And again, the this whole peak end, the end thing is such a powerful, important piece.
And I just had an aha moment there thinking about the peak end, because is the end ever the end? And so I've read where proactive notifications are by the year 2025 will outnumber reactive contacts into the contact center. And so as we're thinking about proactive outreach, these are the sorts of things that really could help build positive experiences.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and it ties it. That just kind of aha'd it for me with the point you made before. Is I was saying the end is when the dog likes it or not, but there may be a next step in the journey, which is you're going to take the pet food back, and you're going to be worried, are they going to be sympathetic about all that? But you're right, even better, hey, how was it?
Mhm.
And if it was bad, you can reply there and oh my gosh, bring it back, we'll give you credit, we've got 3 other great dog foods that might work, let's help you here. Yeah, how do you turn a negative into a positive? That's, your car seller's never going to do that, because he was a one-off guy. I mean, if it was a car dealership, maybe. But
Right,
but a
right.
store,
But
yeah, why wouldn't you do that?
yeah, and if you think about, car dealerships versus those personal one-off sales, definitely there's opportunity there to build stickiness, to continue on with that customer journey for the life cycle of that car. And ultimately you're trying to build that lifetime customer because they're going to inevitably purchase a next car.
Right.
You're going to inevitably purchase puppy food until your puppy turns 1, and then it's, hey, so since your puppy liked this food, this is great, a great next step with this type of dog food, and matching that up to whoever the buyer is. And then building stickiness of happy second birthday, puppy, happy third birthday, dog,
Right.
continuing on
Yeah.
that whole journey. And I saw on social media where Chewy, if they get a call into their contact center for their subscription services, asking for their subscription services to end because a person lost their pet, they will in turn send a sympathy card and potentially a memorial gift over to
Oh,
that
that's
customer
nice.
to really build that stickiness of, hey, we're sorry you lost your pet.
That's yeah, and that's just nice.
it,
It's
it is, but
probably
it's
not all that expensive.
right. And thinking about this peak end, thinking about how peak that
Yeah.
pet death is, and showing that you care with a positive engagement after that such a negative experience is genius.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It really is. Well, we can end on a genius note. I can't think of anything better to do.
All right, sounds good, Max. Until next week.
Okay, great. Well, that was fun. I think
That was a
that
lot
was
of
a
fun.
a good chat. I enjoyed it.
Great topic. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.